It's a confusing experience, to be sure. The experience of waking up and seeing that every single one of the top stories on Spain's biggest news sites are disparaging my country, by which I mean my birth country, the USA. I got up yesterday morning an hour before dawn, as usual, made some coffee, and opened El País on my laptop. And there it was, pages and pages of angry anti-American sentiment. About a week ago, the U.S. Army Delta Force went in and removed Nicolás Maduro from his palace in Caracas. This sounded like a good thing if I had ever heard one. The Chavista regime in Venezuela is both brutal and incompetent, and as a result, Spain has around 700,000 Venezuelans living here. Many of them arrived as asylum seekers. In a country that is so pro-refugee, you would think the government and media would be anti-dictator as well. But you would be wrong. President Pedro Sanchez condemned the capture of Maduro as soon as it happened. And yesterday I learned that the real danger to the world is the United States of America. Hey everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 128. Thank you very much for listening. I've got 3 shout-outs today because we've had 3 donors since the last episode. But this is going to be really short because we don't have any information about any of them. First shout-out is for Carl. Carl said, "Thanks for suffering for us and for Spain." I think Carl probably means my being autonomo and all of the tax stuff that I'm always talking about. In any case, thank you very much, Carl. We also have Mimi in Portland, Oregon. Mimi wrote in Spanish just to say that she is listening from Portland. Thank you, Mimi. I'm happy to have some Spanish speakers also listening here. And finally, we have JR. JR is a multi-donor. JR has donated to the podcast multiple times. Actually, the only thing better than donating to the Spain to Go podcast is donating to the Spain to Go podcast multiple times. So you can do that yourself. Head right on over to expatmadrid.com and send a donation my way. Any amount works for me. You can start at 10 euros. You can go all the way up to however much you want. It helps me to spend more time on this and less time on other businessy things that I also have to do to make a living. So thank you very much to our donors, Carl, Mimi, and JR, and thank you for hanging in there. Let's talk about some of the anti-American sentiment in the Spanish media. Trump, the rampant imperialist brutality. A new type of fascism that affects the whole world. Those were just 3 of the headlines in El País on Sunday, January 11th. Although technically I read La Vanguardia more these days. Now that I live in Barcelona, La Vanguardia has more relevant local news. Let's see what it says over there. 3 scenarios for Trump's imperialism. Denmark, a country in shock. That one's about Trump's supposed plan to take over Greenland. And finally, the U.S. carries the annexationist gene. I've never heard the word annexationist before, but that one is about the fact that the U.S. started out as a series of small colonies on the eastern seaboard and has since become a continent-spanning superpower through acquisition of new territory. Acquisition of new territory is always controversial, I guess. That article has the obligatory claim that Americans don't know much geography, as well as a reference to the Spanish-American War, in which the U.S. got Puerto Rico and Guam. One article from yesterday had a headline that briefly gave me hope for La Vanguardia. No one misses Maduro in Caracas. But that one starts with a line about Trump ignoring every principle of international law and is mostly negative about the whole thing. This was not the first time, though, that I have woken up on the wrong side of history. You may remember November 9th, 2016, but you probably didn't have the same experience I did. That was the day that the entire U.S. media decided that white males without a college degree were the main problem in society. On November 9th and over the following days, I read dozens of articles about the topic. White males without a college degree, angry about issues only they were stupid enough to contemplate, had voted in large numbers for Donald Trump, and as a result, American democracy was over. I had voted for Hillary Clinton personally, but I was a white male with no college degree, and it was not lost on me that the normally smug elites of my country had overnight become rage-filled clowns, and that most of their hate was now directed at people like me, or at least at a caricatured and imaginary version of people like me. It didn't help that I'm from Arizona. It never helps, actually. Being from Arizona just enrages them more. I felt like there was a price on my head. People from flyover states were suddenly suspect. And the left didn't calm down in the weeks and months after the election. Quite the contrary. Soon they dropped the no college degree bit and decided that the problem was straight white males, or more ambiguously, something they called whiteness. This went on for years. It's still going on, actually. I soon found that if I don't start every utterance with the requisite apologies, with a land acknowledgement, and with a renunciation of everything and everyone I grew up with out in the desert, I am basically not welcome among most Americans in Europe. As a result, I usually just keep my opinions to myself. They spew their bile, and I smile and shrug and try to change the subject. But let me go on the record here. Nicolás Maduro is a bad guy, and I'm glad we got him out of power. This next section on the blog is called All the Smart People Hate Themselves. And that is an important line, but I don't usually read the section headings here on the podcast, so I'm just telling you, this section is called All the Smart People Hate Themselves. Smart, of course, is in quotes. Here's a line from a book that is worth contemplating. Rousseau made the hatred for one's own culture the stance of the cultivated person. The book is called European Intellectual History from Rousseau to Nietzsche by Frank M. Turner. And he's talking, of course, about Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the 18th century French philosopher. Apparently, Rousseau decided that his mission in life was to be a critic of society. Today, he would be some troll with a YouTube channel, followed mostly by incels. But his intellectual legacy is that smart people in Western countries mostly think their own country sucks. Of course, anti-Americanism abroad is nothing new. Anyone who pretends to be an intellectual, in Europe at least, has to start by condemning the U.S. Unfortunately, and it didn't used to be like this, the U.S. is now the same. Almost all of our quote-unquote smart people have to sit around hating America. Their reputations will suffer if they don't. I mean the media types, journalists and actors and public intellectuals of all kinds, the flipping of some of the tech bros to the right before the last election in 2024 seems to be the exception here. When Morena and I were in New York a couple of months ago, I tried to explain this to her. We were walking through Grand Central Station after seeing an original handwritten copy of the Bill of Rights at the New York Public Library, and Morena asked me if Americans realize how lucky they are. It was her first time in the U.S., so innocent. I had to tell her that some probably do, but if you actually say that America is a great country or anything similar, there's a good chance that you're the relative who's making things really awkward at Thanksgiving dinner. I've been avoiding writing this article for, let me check my watch, almost 10 years now, because I know a lot of y'all don't want to hear this, but I am the relative who's going to make things really awkward at Thanksgiving dinner. I'm just going to say it. America is a great country, and I've gotten enough hate over the past decade just for being who I am, that I no longer respect the opinions of the "we are the resistance" people. Turns out the tolerance crowd is actually pretty angry and intolerant when you refuse to parrot the slogans of their social class. They despise you if you question their luxury beliefs or tip over their sacred cows. Weird how that works, isn't it? But America is a great country, I will repeat, and one small piece of that greatness is that you, humble American citizen, can say literally anything you want about it without ending up in prison or dead. Try that in one of the world's many dictatorships, for example, Venezuela. Or even try it in Spain. Here you can go to prison for insulting the king. Let's not forget. Being American is a pretty good deal. I should add at this point that your average Spanish person is not obsessed over international news and probably doesn't have a strong feeling about Americans one way or another. I wrote about that in a previous article, Anti-American Sentiment. Do the Spaniards hate expats or Americans? That is episode 111 if you want to check it out. Anyway, what I'm talking about here is the vibe in the media. I have exactly one person in my life who actually wants to talk to me about US politics all the time, and he is in favor. So I don't get any sort of anti-American sentiment when I'm just walking around Barcelona. If you're thinking of visiting Spain or moving here, I wouldn't worry about anti-American feeling too much. Anyway, let's get philosophical. I've talked before about why I think it's important to be pro and not anti. This is a philosophical position. Be pro something and not anti everything. There are a few reasons for this. One is that I suspect our whole culture and civilization was built by optimists, while their pessimistic friends from back home stewed in their own misery. People who believe in something positive can create things. If you're pro-beauty, you can write a symphony or build a cathedral or paint the birth of Venus. But if you're anti-ugliness, you might just sit and complain about how gray and depressing everything has gotten. Another reason to be pro and not anti is that if you are anti-whatever all the time, you just end up being defined by the thing you don't like. And that is a miserable way to live. One of the sad signs of our times, according to Thomas Sowell, is that we have demonized those who produce and canonized those who complain. He also says that activism is a way for useless people to feel important, even if they're actually damaging society as a whole. And I agree, there are a lot of useless people out there who want to feel important. They want so badly to feel important that they're willing to support some really stupid ideas, as long as they can turn it into a protest against the other side. So, my two countries, for better or for worse. In case you haven't been following along here, I recently became Spanish, so I am less comfortable criticizing Spain than I once was. I think that if a country gives you citizenship, you should pay that country back with respect and work hard to be a productive member of society, not some useless whiner. But Spain is another place where sophisticated urbanites are sort of embarrassed by the whole idea of Spanishness. I wrote about this in my article on Symbols of Spain. That is episode 96 if you want to have a listen. Turns out a lot of so-called smart people here in Spain are also critics and not patriots. It is shockingly easy to come up with a list of someone else's faults, and if we're talking about whole countries, it's even easier. But I love both my countries, the US and Spain, despite their several problems. At times like this, I'm glad I'm not one of the smart people. That's about all I've got for today. If you are angry about something I said in this article and thinking about calling me a fascist in the comments section, please consider that if being called a fascist was going to change my mind, it would have done so already. Being further insulted will not make me see the light, I promise. I hope you have a great day, though. It's time for me to go outside. Thank you very much for listening this far. If you would like to donate, once again, the link is expatmadrid.com/donate. You can donate any amount you want over there, expatmadrid.com/donate. I don't even really have vices anymore, so if you donate some money, I will spend it on coffee and sparkling water. That's about as hardcore as I get when I'm really partying down these days. If you're interested in learning Spanish, you can head over to YouTube and look for Learn Spanish with Daniel. I have over 100 videos over there where I'm teaching different aspects of Spanish grammar and vocabulary, also some culture. I work it in. It's a lot of fun. So that is Learn Spanish with Daniel. You can just put that into YouTube search and you will find me. Feel free to like this podcast, subscribe, leave me a rating on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you are. And thank you once again for listening. I hope you have a great day wherever you are in the world, and hasta la próxima. Bye.